Hello everyone, how are you? I hope you're all doing well. It's Kyle from the podcast. I watched 3 new releases kinda semi-recently, and we're gonna talk about them as sort of a catch-up video. One of the movies I watched was the 2024 Roadhouse with Jake Gyllenhaal, directed by Doug Liman. Now, in preparation of watching this one, I watched the original because I'd never seen it before. Now, this might be a controversial opinion, but I didn't really like the original Roadhouse all that much. I think the concept is fun and Patrick Swayze does a good job of portraying the character, but the movie really loses steam halfway through and doesn't really know what to do with itself after a certain point. It gets kind of repetitive, and some of the character writing, specifically with the love interest of that film, really irks me. And there's just also some acting moments that are really cheesy.
I used to fuck guys like you in prison.
And a lot of the technical elements don't really hold up. It's a film that's very steeped in the 80s, and there's nothing wrong with the film sort of feeling like a timepiece that way, but there are some movies where the datedness of it just kind of bogs it down a bit. I gave the original Roadhouse a 4 out of 10. I'm sorry if that hurts you. Come at me. And that's not to say this newer one isn't much better. I think I did particularly have a little bit more fun with the newer version than I did the older one, just because I think this one embraces what it is more than the original one did. This one is balls out insane in terms of some of the action and the set pieces that are going on in this film. Jake Gyllenhaal plays Dalton. He's the main guy in this one. He's playing this character more like a closet psychopath than Patrick Swayze did with the original character, where he's a little bit more zen. He's a philosopher, but he also is a fighter. In this one, Jake is a former UFC fighter that is kind of repressing his insane psychopathic tendencies. And I think that's a little bit more believable and a little less stilted when it comes to the premise, because a character like this would be kind of crazy in order to do the things that he does in this movie. This movie feels like a video game in which you're watching someone else play it, controlling Jake Gyllenhaal's character going through this small open world map on these weird little side quests until it builds into the main quest whenever Conor McGregor shows up. Conor McGregor in this movie, I can only describe him as an alien who's never acted before, who did a shit ton of cocaine before they started rolling the film. My guy cannot act his way out of a paper bag in this movie. It doesn't really hinder the film all that much because, like I said, this movie has a level of self-awareness about it that it kind of embraces the campy nature of it, obviously, but at the same time, it is still very heavily flawed, and Conor McGregor's performance is really not good. His line deliveries are super weird, and half the time they feel like they're ADR'd in, so it doesn't even feel like it's actually him reading the lines in the moment. So yeah, pretty goofy, pretty campy. I like a lot of the over-the-top action. Some of the editing is really choppy. Conor McGregor's bad. If this movie didn't have Jake Gyllenhaal in it, I think it would be much worse for it, because he really does kind of elevate it with the way he's playing this character. Roadhouse 2024, I'm giving a 5 out of 10. Next up is Late Night with the Devil, starring David Dalmatian. Yes, that's how I'm going to pronounce his last name, because I'm not even going to try to actually say what it is. This was directed by Colin and Cameron Cairns. Looks like a duo brother director type of thing. This one's about a 70s late night talk show host who has an exorcism on one of his episodes in order to boost ratings, and obviously things go awry. This is a very unique horror film. I really like the way it's framed with the 70s aesthetic going on. It does a really good job of portraying the events within that lens, and I think David Dalmatian does a really good job of embodying that sort of like kind of goofy 70s talk show host who may be a little bit in over his head but still has the confidence to carry a show like that. It just feels like they do a really good job of making him fit into that 70s talk show style, and I really like what they did with him. This movie has a few scares, a few genuine moments that made me go, ugh, that's creepy, that's scary, but at the same time, it is steeped in that 70s style, so it is a little bit campy in moments, which I think do work overall for the film. One thing I especially liked about this movie was the music. I think it fits very well and kind of embodies that sort of like cheesy Halloween feel to it, while also maintaining a level of seriousness that builds and builds towards the end of the film. One thing I think could have been improved on is some of the scenes where it's not being seen through the television screen. There's moments throughout where the camera camera isn't rolling and it kind of cuts to a different perspective of someone who looks like might be filming behind the scenes, but it doesn't really specify whether or not that's the case. So it's just kind of up to you to determine whether or not it's just a now straightforward narrative in these moments, or if there's actually someone filming behind the scenes. If they had made it clear that someone was doing like a behind the scenes documentary and they were getting like these snippets of moments behind the scenes and you get to see the characters how they are when the camera isn't rolling, I think that would have been very interesting and would have added a level of depth to this movie that I think it was trying to reach but didn't quite reach altogether. I also think the ending of this kind of peters out. After a certain moment, it goes through this sort of change in filmmaking style where it becomes very apparent you're not really watching it through the TV screen anymore. And I think to me that's just a step down from what it was doing previously with having us see it through the lens of that 70s talk show. I like the different details hidden throughout it. I like that this movie feels like you could watch it multiple times and catch different things going on visually. There's a scene where they slow the camera down and look back at footage of what they've shot on the talk show itself, and that to me was one of the most compelling scenes in the entire movie. I really liked the effects that went into it and the overall creepiness of that scene itself. So yeah, Late Night with the Devil, I'm giving a 7 out of 10. Didn't think it was perfect, but I could see myself watching this again and catching new things from it, and maybe that will affect how I feel about it. But for right now, I'm pretty solid at a 7. Last up is Monkey Man, directed by Dev Patel. It also stars Dev Patel and was produced by Jordan Peele. I guess this was going to be a Netflix release, but Jordan Peele got his hands on it and pushed for it to be released in theaters, which I'm kind of glad he did because this was a fun action thriller film. As a first feature, I think that this is quite impressive from Dev Patel, who it sounds like this film kind of went into some kind of production hell, and from the stories you can read about this movie, it sounds like it was a grueling shoot for Dev Patel overall. So that in itself is quite interesting and honestly makes me respect what he did in this movie even more so. This film is a really fun, really stylistic, well choreographed action movie that I think is carried by him and his performance. It's not like his character has a ton of depth. You get a backstory about why he's doing what he's doing, and that's enough motivation for you to get behind the events that are happening in this movie. And it's sort of like a climb to the top, beat 'em up thriller film that has its highs and lows, of course. I really love the way that the action is presented in this movie for the most part. It's very well choreographed, like a John Wick, but it's almost filmed like a Bourne movie. And I've seen people complain about some of the shaky cam in the action scenes of this movie, and I definitely don't disagree with that entirely. I think that there are instances throughout this film where the camera movement and the way it's edited together is a little bit nauseating. Sometimes it's hard to tell what exactly you're looking at in certain moments, and that kind of takes you out of the immersion of some of the fight scenes or some of the chase scenes or what's going on in this film. But at the same time, I don't think that this is so shaky to the point of not being able to recognize what's going on screen. This definitely isn't the worst case of shaky cam I've ever witnessed, and anyone who says that it bogs the movie down tremendously hasn't seen a movie like Taken 3 where that movie is all shaky cam. A little bit of an issue with that, but otherwise it didn't really bug me too much. Definitely not the worst case of it I've ever seen in a movie before. Where this movie kind of loses me is towards the middle, where the character has to kind of lay low for a while. To me, that sort of drags it down a bit and overstays its welcome a little bit too much. I think they probably could have cut 15 to 20 minutes out of that particular chunk of time in the movie, and it still would have been an effective way to convey what's going on. Honestly, it probably would have been more effective because then it wouldn't feel as meandering and it wouldn't feel like the movie is kind of at an unnecessary pause. I like the kinetic energy of this, and I like how in certain moments it just keeps going and going with all the frenetic energy that it's presenting you. This is a movie where a lot of moments things start to happen and they kind of just don't really let up until the end of that chase scene or that moment or that fight scene. And I really enjoy movies like that where the chaos just keeps building and building until it comes to a head. And then after a certain scene like that, when they take the time to pause and you spend about a half hour in this one location, it really kind of bogs the movie down for me. But nevertheless, I still really enjoy this film overall. I think that the action is quite interesting and really fun. I think that John Wick did a lot in terms of influencing action movies that are coming out now, in that it's really set the bar kind of high for them to reach. You can't quite get away with taking 3 levels of action and editing anymore. anymore, which is for the better. I would absolutely 100% watch more of these, and if Dev Patel just decided to make Monkey Man movies for the rest of his life, I don't think I'd complain. So yeah, Monkey Man, this is an 8 out of 10 for me. Really solid, really enjoyed it. If you're a fan of action, I highly recommend it. And that is it for the movies that I watched recently. Thank you guys for checking this out. Look forward to more reviews, hopefully in the future, near or far, wherever you are. Check out the podcast if you haven't already. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I look forward to talking to you guys again about more movies. Peace.